Yes, ma'am, and then I'll come to you.
Okay. There's a lot of parents in the state that are upset about Common Core. There's a lot of candidates who say that they oppose Common Core, but it's a complete redesign of public education to the workforce development model. So within that model, there's a lot of data collection going on because President Obama gutted the FERPA law that once, maintained that student privacy with parental consent and parental permission before the schools can release information. Because that's been gutted and because now that's happening, my concern is that this is not a topic that's even being brought up. So my question to you is, would you reinstate the FERPA law, reinstate those privacy protections? How would you go about doing that? Are you aware that this is even happening? And is that a concern to you, as it is to us?
Well, the short answer is yes, it is a concern, but let me be more direct. The role that the Department of Education has played in our nation's educational system has been harmful, not helpful.
Yeah.
Here is the data that supports that. The Department of Education has gotten more funding, more power every year for 40 years, and the quality of education in this country has continued to deteriorate. What do you conclude from that? Funding in the Department of Education has nothing to do with the quality of education. And in fact, it has a demonstrated negative effect. Common Core, however Common Core started out, Common Core has turned into what? A bureaucratic program designed to teach teachers how to teach and students how to learn. And by the way, there are companies with vested interests in the outcome of Common Core who are right in the middle of it. Testing companies, textbook companies. This too is an example of crony capitalism. This is what happens when government gets big and powerful and expensive. What happens? The big, the powerful, the wealthy, the well-connected take advantage of it. And meanwhile, the small and the powerless get crushed because they can't hire all the accountants and the lawyers and the lobbyists that you need to deal with all this power and complexity. So let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to the basics. What is it that is most impactful on a child's education? A good teacher, an involved parent or community or family. That's what's most impactful on a child's education. So let's go back to that. When we deny parents and families choices, we deny their kids chances. We have, you know the data, no doubt, but we've been talking about the Department of Education in many ways has been funded over these decades to try and shrink the income gap, the achievement gap between kids of poor families and kids of wealthier families. Guess what? The achievement gap hasn't gotten better. If anything, it's gotten worse. I just looked at some really sobering data here in New Hampshire, where the achievement gap between rich and poor is growing larger and larger. That is not the American dream. This is a country where, regardless of your circumstances, you must have possibilities. And possibilities start first and foremost with a good education. So we have to give parents choices, loads of choices, and the funding to support those choices, which means money needs to flow out of Washington into the states and towards communities. There are some interesting programs in certain states where literally parents own funding. And if their kid is in a failing school or a failing teacher, they can pick their kid up and move them. If parents don't have choices, then kids don't have chances. And choices means what? It means not just choice of a different school district, it might mean choice of homeschooling or voucher programs or magnet schools, a whole charter schools. What's disappointing to me, deeply disappointing, is Democrats are against choices. I don't understand why, but they are. Why? Because I think they think the teachers' unions allow them and say, no, we have to stay in charge. The more choices we give parents, the more chances their children have. Education is at the heart of the American dream. Democrats are fundamentally on the wrong side of this issue. But we need less power in Washington, less money in Washington, more power and more money in the hands of parents and communities and school districts to fix this problem. So we can't tinker around the edges. We have to literally challenge the status quo of Washington. I will close with one last thought on this subject, and then I'll come to the lady who had her hand up over there. Democrats are totally on the wrong side of this issue, and I think this is at the core of what we have to say to the American people. I can remember the head of the Chicago Public Teachers Union speaking during a strike in Chicago. And what she said was this: the issue at stake was teacher accountability. And what the head of the teachers union said was, we cannot be held accountable for the performance of students in our classroom because too many of them are poor and come from broken families. Now, what was she saying? She was saying, if you're poor and you come from a broken family, you can't learn and we don't have to teach you. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not what this country believes, and it cannot be the way we run our education system. But it is how it's run today, because the power sits in Washington, D.C.
Crop TV.